What's up, guys? It's your boy Ray coming at you live and direct from somewhere as always. I hope y'all are having a great Thursday. I wanted to with you today about just a follow up on something that I kind of mentioned in the last little episode of these little fireside chats that we do, and something that a few other people I know, Blackburn has also spoken about this in on his Pickaxe and Roll show, and that is initially part of why I think the NBA is becoming a little bit more like the NFL, namely in the fact that the second apron, in a lot of ways, is functioning like a. It's not a hard cap in the way that the NFL has a hard cap, but it's a firm cap, depending on the finances of your owner, basically. And, that has had a certain implications on the league and certainly on the Nuggets. But today I kind of wanted to chat about, rather than the similarities, some of the differences. And the main two I want to discuss to get into those, I would say the big thing that I think the NBA is going to have to craft going forward in the next collective bargaining agreement are mechanisms that allow, much like the NFL, allow for players who want to stay with an organization to work with their teams financially to ensure that they can do that they can stay with that team and continue to compete with that team without bankrupting the team. I think about guys like Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon right now. A lot of why they're on in a lot of trade conversations, it's not that they can't win or be winning players or achieve success with them on the Nuggets. A lot of it is that they're making so much money that there isn't a way to work around their finances en route to building the team around them that they need to be successful. So if you follow me on Twitter, you might have touched on the conversation that I had over the last couple of days regarding Jamal, regarding Aaron, where functionally my belief is that Jamal and Jokic are an elite duo, but have limitations as players that over the course of the last decade, Denver has learned to kind of build around. And I think it started with size. And I think once they arrived at the tandem of Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon, it's a combination of size and athleticism and the ability to space the floor. And when you got to that point of having KCP, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter, when you think about that trio, think about what they do. They can all space the floor, especially Michael Porter and KCP in the year that they won the championship, from a horizontal perspective, that if either guy is in the corner or on the opposite side of the opposite wing, that the shots can go up like immediately and confidently, consistently. And that being important because that gravity is what's needed to create the space for the two-man game so that they can function without being overly pressured, or that when teams do try to devote the resources they need to slow the two-man game down, there are consistent, easy outlets that punish teams for trying to overweigh their resources there. Aaron Gordon, maybe he wasn't the shooter that he was now in the championship year, but he was an elite dunker spot player who still, even in that year, also was able to hit his threes, so that you had a vertical spacing aspect as well. And Michael Porter also, I think, filled in to some degree in that way too, that you had two guys in the forward spots who had the size to be threats at the rim and apply rim pressure, but also everyone's spacing the floor. But also between Michael Porter and Aaron Gordon, 14 rebounds a game in the playoffs. That they're very much a form of reinforcement from a physicality perspective for Jokic and Murray. And that KCP, maybe he isn't a big guy, but his screen navigation covers up for a lot of Murray's flaws as well. Maybe not from a raw push-pull physicality perspective, but from a mobility, athleticism, chasing guys around screens kind of way. And how do you build a roster like that in the current environment, I think it looks really dubious because of the financials of Jamal making roughly like $20 more million and Aaron making something like $15 more million. The team's already kind of jettisoned Michael Porter's contract, right? So it's looking very challenging for them to replicate those skill sets. As much as Cam does some things that Mike didn't do, he's a better like team scheme defender. Um, I do think he has some weaknesses in terms of just individual one-on-one defense that the Wolves were still willing to try to press and push him on. But and I do think he I don't want to rehash that debate. Cam is a better ball handler than Mike for sure, but I don't think he was able to be that consistent. There's a reason that they discouraged Michael Porter from dribbling. That's not just that he can't dribble; it's that they needed the floor spacing for the two-man game to work. Now that said, circling back, what I think the NBA really needs for the health of its best organizations is mechanisms that, from a financial perspective, give relief. You know, when you look around the NFL, you can restructure contracts, you can add years and lower your immediate cap hit, you can cut guys and re-sign them. There are so many different like little ways to manipulate contracts. You can apply void years. There are so many different ways to manipulate contracts in the NFL that make it so that you can kind of work with the players that want to be there or who you have leverage over if that ends up being the case, that the NBA just doesn't have right now. And I think in some ways it's suffocating team building a little bit. Free agency is already such a dry market, a dry, inefficient market, especially if you're not one of those marquee teams. The trade market is kind of dubious in a lot of ways. And at least if you're the Denver Nuggets, more often than not, you're giving up value just trying to maintain the financial health of your team rather than utilizing the trade market as a means of trying to make improvements. Uh, unless you were able to get under the closing doors of tanking, not to say that tanking is over because I don't think it is in any way. I actually think tanking is going to be more prevalent than it has ever been in the NBA, but in a more distributed way. But that's a whole other conversation. Unless you are like the Spurs or like the Thunder and that you are able to collect a series of high-level draft picks that you're able to develop and turn into players to surround a superstar with, internal development feels like the only mechanism left for effective, efficient team building. And I think that's something that the NBA really needs to work on. I also think when we are looking ahead at the next CBA, I have to imagine there has to be some level of relief in terms of loosening some of these trade restrictions around first and second apron teams to the point that we want teams to be willing to go for it without feeling like they're stuck behind something that's going to be handcuffs as the metaphor I'm going to use for the team going forward, so that when you do go into the second apron, it's not impossible to get out of. There's not no way you can unwind and unspool that thread if you do want to get down under that second apron. The trade restrictions, I think, are just a little bit too much right now. I think it's a little bit too stifling. As much as there is parity in the league, and we've had multiple championships for like the last 8 years, and I think that's nice for the team. You know, if you're a Knicks fan, great. You know, that's awesome that we've been able to have that turnover. But I also think a lot of teams, there's something to the idea that the emphasis on the regular season being more important, that parity being more of a thing in the NBA. You know, it's raising the floor, but also lowering the ceiling. I'm not saying we need the full throated return of super teams. We need Steph and LeBron and Kawhi and James Harden to all go form some super team and in Golden State or something like that. I just think it would be nice to have some level of continuity, and I think that would bring a level of investment that is a little bit more long term, feels a little bit less fleeting, and I think in the long term would be good for the health of the NBA. That's what I wanted to chat about today. I hope you'll have a great rest of your day. Nuggets Wave will be having a podcast on Sunday evening, so keep on the lookout for that. And I will catch y'all later. Thanks.